much, Greg, for inviting me to speak to the Sherlockians of Baltimore. I'm really excited to do this. Oh, wait, that's another group. I'm sorry. Let me start over. I apologize. It's an honor to speak in front of Watson's Tin Box. I've been wanting to give a presentation. Wait, that's another group also out of Baltimore. Y'all got way too many groups. You know, you need to do like Dallas, where we just have one group. Greg, who am I speaking to again? I always forget.
You're speaking to the Six Napoleons of Baltimore, sir.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, we'll go with that then. So, Greg, thank you very much for asking me to give this talk. I know a few of you have seen this presentation before, but I did make a few changes to it. And quite honestly, if you're like me and reaching a certain age, you know that the only heavy breathing you ever hear anymore is when you go up the stairs. Well, it's the same thing with memory too. You know that all jokes are still new to me now, and I can hide my own Easter eggs. So if you've seen this presentation, more than likely you don't remember it, or if you did, I have actually made some changes to it. So to get started, how this idea even got started? Well, my favorite movie of all time is Wizard of Oz, and will continue to always be The Wizard of Oz. Who would have guessed? One small trivia for the people that are fairly young in this audience, if there are people that are below 40 or 50 years old. While I watched The Wizard of Oz every year on my TV set as a young child, it wasn't until 1975 or 76 that I actually found out it was in color too, because all we had was a black and white TV set, which I'm sure some of the rest of y'all had. It had rabbit ears on it, and it had a remote control that my dad affectionately called, "Steve, get up and change the channel." That was the name of the remote. So also, for years, I've always been intrigued by the ruby slippers. And as y'all know, there were several pair of the ruby slippers. Originally in the book, they were silver slippers, but they made them ruby colored for the movie because they thought they'd be easier to see. And one of the last pairs that sold was for $510,000 that Debbie Reynolds actually owned back in 2011. So I started thinking about it. Why do not other items from the movie get the same respect? For example, why doesn't anybody ever look for Glinda's, magic wand, or the basket that Dorothy carried Toto in, or even the oil can that they used to lubricate the Tin Man with? And nobody ever mentions those things too. And so that got me started thinking. And what I thought about was, of all the things from The Wizard of Oz, what is the one thing that I would want to have, myself and own professionally and personally? I can narrow it down to one item, and that is the crystal ball that the Wicked Witch used to track Dorothy and her gang through the forest. As a 5 or 6 year old watching TV, that was the most amazing thing, that she could actually, see somebody through a crystal ball. And I would still love to have that thing in my living room. So then the next thing, the old brain started kicking in. And the question came to me, all right, in Sherlock Holmes, what would be the one thing that I would want to keep from the canon? Of all the 60 stories, what would be the most treasured item that I would want? Well, I mentioned this to a few people in our own science society, the crew of the Bark Lone Star. That immediately grew into an idea to survey as many Sherlockians as I could find around the country and see what would they want to keep? What would be the one item that they would, want to have out of the entire 60 stories? So each respondent to the survey was given the chance to receive and keep one memento from each, from any of the canon, any of the adventures. Now, there were two very simple rules of thumb for it. Number one, the item had to be from the canon itself and not from any pastiche or movie or other media. And number two, you had to agree to keep the item. So, there wouldn't be the lure of getting the most expensive thing just to turn around and sell it. So you had to be willing to hold on to it for the rest of your life. Now, on the great side, I had 279 Sherlockians participate in the survey, which I thought back then was amazing. Almost a quarter of them were either BSI investitured people or ASH investitured people. 60% were male and 40% female, so that was fairly close. And almost 3/4 of them said that they were associated with some Sherlockian society. So I was very excited about that. But I am going to say one little side note. I learned a very valuable lesson from no less than Peter Blau from the Red Circle, who had been my mentor and friend for almost 20 years. Evidently, I learned that some BSI members do not react kindly from receiving a survey in their email box from someone from Texas that they have never heard of before. I didn't understand that, but evidently they did. But as soon as I used Peter's name in the email, as well as some lady from Minnesota named Julie, the reception turned out to be much more friendly. Evidently, those two can get through doors I can't. And I did get their, and by the way, I did get both of their permission to use their names. So, you know, as a reference. So anyway, so out of the 209 responses that I got, there were 59 unique items that people listed out that they would like to have something from the canon. And it came from 36 different stories, those 59 items. The story that had the most items to come from was the Sign of 4, which with 11, followed by the Adventure of the Musgrave Ritual with 8, and the Adventure of the Empty House with 8 also. Now, let's break it down by some categories. The most unique items requested, I can list into 4 different categories. For curiosity's sake, that is just basically people just were intrigued with what this item would look like and you know what they would do with it. Personal connections. Some people had, you know, childhood memories from one of the items and wanted that. Just for the art of it, a lot of people said it painted a picture of Victorian London to them. And then big dreams, big tickets. And that's just, there was some financial component to it. Even though they couldn't sell it, they still thought it would be worth something. So for the curiosity, I'm not going to go through a lot of these, but you know, the polyphonic motives, the obviously the deer stalker, the dressing gowns, the bullpup. People just want to know, is it a dog? Is it a pistol? What is it? The gassaging, and of course the large tin box that Holmes himself said he owned, that he had cases in. On the personal, the horse from Silver Blaze, I thought that was kind of weird that they wanted a horse. Bottle of liquor, the Penang lawyer, on down. So the different ones that they had. Just for the art of it, the dancing men little sheets of paper, some people wanted that, the slips of paper. Watson's revolver, Tonga's blowpipe. Many of these you can see at Denny Dobry's house, by the way. The last one has to have its own category, unfortunately. And that is, one person said they wanted the whip brandished by Irene Adler in a scandal in Belgravia, even though this is not canonical. 2 people actually said they wanted Irene Adler herself. And again, this was right after the show came out. For moral and legal reasons, we skipped on that, decided that that wasn't a very smart move. But here's the ones that got the most votes. And I do think this is kind of fun. So number 4 was the violin itself. So, and it received 10% of all the potential votes. People wanted, you know, Holmes's violin, even though they can't sell it because it's a Stradivarius. Number 3, with 22, with 11% of the votes, the blue carbuncle. Again, you can't sell it, but people just thought that would be a beautiful piece of jewelry to have. Number 2, the picture of Irene Adler. I guess if you can't have Irene itself, the next best thing is to have the photograph of her. So that was 15% of the vote. But the number 1 item with 30% of the people voting for it was Watson's tin box. People just, they just want to know what's in there, what is in there, and what are the other stories that might be in there. Now, since it was my idea in my survey, I got to get 2 votes. That's the power of the pen. So the first one I would suggest is I would like the rose from the Naval Treaty, even though it probably doesn't look good, you know, 130 years ago. But to me, that rose, more than any other time in the canon, gave me evidence that Sherlock Holmes is a human being and not just a machine. And the paragraph there, I've always thought was one of the best paragraphs in the entire 60 stories. And then the second one, and again, this is my sentimental favorite. I actually would like the bullet that grazed Watson during the three Garridebs. And the reason is that this scene gives me the greatest understanding of the amazing friendship between those two. Each would be willing to give his life for each other. And while they quibble and take issue with each other, it is apparent that there is a deep-seated caring that all friends should strive for. So that would be my memento to keep, that what friends are actually for. Now, Greg, I'm going to go off kilter here a little bit. If you don't mind, I'm going to climb up. I don't have a soapbox, but I do have the tin box of John Watson. So I'm going to climb up on it for a minute and confess a couple of things that I witnessed recently that I wanted to share with everybody. So last Friday, I was invited to help Don Hobbs conduct a interview of Jerry Kegley for the BSI Oral History. And toward the end of the interview, as Don and Jerry were talking, and it was obvious that these two are very good friends themselves, but Don and Jerry both brought up a couple of departed friends of theirs, that were mutual friends. In both cases, Jerry pointed out that both men were two of the nicest people that he could ever ask to meet. And, and they were Sherlockians, and he just said the whole world loved them, and they loved the whole world, basically. I have to say, I hope someday someone will say the same thing about me when, if I ever get to do an oral history or somebody does an oral history about me. I know that I can say that a couple of people at this meeting, I would also say, are two of the nicest people that I have ever met. I'm not going to embarrass you by saying it out loud, but there are a few people here that I consider to be the nicest people I've ever met. There's a few others, not so much, but for the most part, a few of you are. And the second thing that happened, I was fortunate to hear our own Monica Schmidt give a talk yesterday at the Houston Society on collecting versus hoarding. I'm not going to get into the details, but during the question and answers, the discussion also went into the hobby of Sherlock Holmes in itself. And I realized this hobby of ours has given me the opportunity to gain some very valuable friends that I will cherish for the rest of my life. But we have to remember, it's a hobby, gang. This means that we all need to recognize continuously that not all Sherlockians want to be a Baker Street irregular. That sometimes just being a member of a local society is good enough for a lot of people. And secondly, not all Sherlockians will ever be published in the Baker Street Journal or other scholarly journal. Not all of us have the writing talents of Bonnie McBird, Lindsay Fay, Les Klinger, Tom Sinkin, Bob Steck, Bob Katz, Julie McCurris, Brad Kiefhofer, and there's a whole list of people that are wonderful writers that I enjoy reading their stories and their essays. But a lot of us aren't writers like that. There's thousands and thousands of us that are in this hobby simply to enjoy it for what it's worth. The appreciation of Sherlock Holmes and what Sir Arthur Conan Doyle gave us. So I want to do all I can to ensure that all these fans, and I'm putting fans in quotations, are welcome to be part of us, including the next generation of Sherlockians we try to help through the Beacon Society and the Junior Sherlockian Society. That in itself should keep me busy for a few more years. So with that, Greg, thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Any questions of Steve? Just unmute and ask, please. Steve, I think you covered it too well.
I'm good with that.
So, well, in that case.
Oh, I've got a quickie.
Okay, please.
So, Steve, I'm curious if anybody in your survey asked for the same thing that I would want. I have very specific reasons, but did anybody, I'm not going to go anywhere weird, Greg. Did anybody ask for the needle?
Nobody specifically asked for the needle, but somebody asked for the bottle of cocaine.
That would just decay.
Yeah, well,
would stay around. Plus, you aren't going to get arrested for the syringe. But
True. So
However, Mike, that was still a little weird. Just a little.
for me, that was really boring.
I
The question I'm not going to ask is when Steve said, and some other people not so much, how many thought of me? All right, I'll mute.
Too late. Any other questions or comments for Steve? Mr. Kiefhofer.
Okay, since we're asking, what else, did anybody try to get the wax bust?
no, nobody put that in there, and I don't know if they thought maybe it was so damaged from the headshot, sort of the John F. Kennedy issue. I don't know, but nobody asked for that one. I will say, I gotta say, I don't know if I was surprised or not that, again, I had 260 people, respond to it, but there were only 59 items that came up. So a lot of people were thinking the exact same things, because if you think about it, the 60 stories, there's literally hundreds and hundreds of things that you could ask for, so I thought it was interesting that it all tended to kind of stay together.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Steve. And with that, congratulations on becoming Napoleon CCLXXV, Napoleon 275. So congratulations, Steve.
Thank you very much.